to restructure the hall, and from where we get something which most of the architects and interior designers, they know something which is called as the reverberation time. So the whole course of acoustics is based on a mathematical platform where we talk about something which is called as reverberation time. There is a certain formula to it. I'll just try to define it very simply. The reverberation time, it is the time that takes the sound to decay in 60 decibels. So the lower the reverberation time, the dead is the space. The higher the reverberation time, the live is the space. So particularly if we are looking for a recording room, then it has a very low reverberation time. But when we are looking into a kind of an auditorium, it has a relatively high reverberation time. So once again, we have certain formulas, we have certain numbers. Also, the RT also is related to something which is the volume of the whole space. It calculates the space in terms of numbers, and also certain things which is the surface area of materials that have been used in the space. So it also has a variable which is called as the coefficient of absorption. And this coefficient of absorption is what is given by these tables, which is different for different frequencies. Then after we give this kind of a broad background to the students, that this whole thing leads to a solve a design problem. So that's the whole idea of how acoustics has been is being covered. Traditionally, we probably were taught in that manner. We are giving the lectures in that manner only, with some modifications and some new technologies and some introduction to new materials. So, this whole mathematics is something which was worrying me a lot, because that was something that the students were not able to grasp. But at the bottom line, the thing was, if it is all about us, if the computer can at least simulate approximately how the sound will move and how the sound will dissipate and where will it stop, then probably it will help us visually change, and probably then we can test ourselves to different kind of if.
There's some disturbance or from your end. Is everyone facing that?
Yeah.
No, but I'm in a soundproof room.
All right.
I think if you turn your mic off, Pritam and Radha, I think the network can probably support only one speaker at a time.
So I think I just wanted to mention these two things. I can take it up a little later on, because this is an area, which is extremely close to, one's being, I would say.
Yes, sir. I completely agree. As in the sense that I started it as a helping tool to the students, but then there were certain questions which at the moment came by when I was doing this research, that why couldn't these things happen? Why couldn't we deduce some kind of an experience in terms of this acoustics and everything? And why do we always end up with numbers? Because probably because computers do first generate, the easiest thing to do from a computer is to generate numbers. So I am really stuck at that point where I am struggling with the numbers. But maybe I could take it a bit forward. I could take a little bit of help from people who know how to move me forward with this line and align myself to the sensory world. So,
You know, I can also mention why I'm so much, sort of interested in this. You know, in late 60s, NID had a wonderful sound studio. And it was that time when they were actually trying to reduce sound into some kind of visual format, like barcodes and things like that, you see. And this is something, which in those days was also used in the monastery at Lature by Xenakis, because I think at that time these computational models were not available. So this barcode method of producing sound visually was something, which was really a kind of link between what you can do in the field of sound and what you can transfer in architecture. So this is something, which even at that time, I think Xenakis was a great musician. And since he was also an architect, I think he was trying to really, sort of deal with this idea as to in how many ways, you see, one can really orient, the perception of music in people. And I think Lature was one of the great examples of really combining this. And in NID, there were people, who were actually dealing with this, you see. I think NID in the beginning years, they did tremendous amount of work. And there were some people, who were extremely creative and bright, but unfortunately, in early 70s, everybody left, you see, because I think they really, felt somehow stifled in NID. And after leaving NID, they settled in West, and there they have done enormous amount of work, you see, in their fields. So our sort of orientation to somehow understanding music through different types of, fields was something, which actually started in those days, And, understanding music by listening, by experiencing, by somehow, working on design where sound was considered the primary focus and developing a design, which really later on requires least amount of intervention was the goal of an architect, you see, in those days. And that's why when Khan designed an auditorium for I Am Here, he used to call it a violin. Because, that was the kind of preparedness, you see, one had to really, do in order to translate, the ideas into a built form, which will also become like a musical instrument. And, this was the trend in those days. You see, for example, if you went and saw Berlin Philharmonic, I think that had the least later corrections in terms of sound, So architects were tuned, to train like this, you see. And if you see our own traditional examples, I think you will really discover something which is magnificent, and which also really tells us how sensitive our people were, to sound, because for example, every temple was an instrument, which was a kind of performance place, and music played a tremendous role there, So like a Gothic church, you see, Gothic church cannot be understood unless you really understand the importance of music in it with the organ. So this is something, which I think has to be somehow married when you talk about, algorithms and things like that, you see, because I think unless you marry these two, the subject might become a little bit dry, you see. This is my belief. Thank you.
yes, sir. Completely agree, sir. I'll pick up.
Thank you, Professor Varma.
Can I be bold
Yeah.
enough to jump in as well? Sorry, just taking. I think your methodology raises larger questions of your concern about validation. I think you need to kind of, I feel, assess what your systems of validation are and for whom. Because very often we are drawn towards a scientific validation and layer the original intention with another theoretical method that then eventually takes us twice away from the object of study. For example, the magnificent building sections you showed, and what Professor Savas also talked about, the temples, and you simulating it with computational tools, and therefore arriving at a formula that works in that does not necessarily mean it. Obviously, it means they did not use the computer to design those buildings. So, for example, the vitamin list sticker on a banana is not going to produce the banana. What are you going to do with that ingredient, vitamin sticker that is put on the fruit saying it has so much energy, so much calories, so much vitamin A, so much potassium, and the rest of it? If you arrange those ingredients in a lab, it's not going to come up with the apple or a banana. What I'm suggesting is that numbers per se, to my mind, are not the problem. We've always worked with numbers since our ancient civilization. We have generated new numbers like 0. Don't need to remind everybody that. Numbers is not a new idea. The problem is whether the numbers are helping you to homogenize, standardize, or individualize. That is the trick. How do you play with numbers in order to enter into the psychology of a person, where the hearing of the sound plays on your mind, and therefore, as you mentioned, psychology, memory, experience, upbringing, nurture, nature, all those things will play on how you perceive that sound. And indeed, it would be interesting, just an aside, to study why one hears sounds in our heads when there is no sound. So even a situation, I was watching the Bengali film recently, and this character said that certain situations demand an orchestra. And he's sitting in a restaurant and he's seeing two people argue or quarreling, and then he's playing that orchestra in his head without even hearing what they're saying. So I think it's a wonderful topic, Pritam, and I congratulate you for choosing this very interesting layered topic, and I hope you will keep the complexity and the layering of it to see where you go, and also kind of engage with the subjective, the non-quantifiable elements as well of sound, and to my mind, subjective experience is more reliable than objective experience, because it's closer to one's experience, closer to the truth, whatever that may be. So these were the some of the comments that validation, what yardstick you're choosing for what, who is the audience for this validation, you, or are you trying to enter into how exactly, what were the testing instruments of the time? Surely they must have had some testing instruments to arrive at the solutions they did, and why do you need to standardize? What does standardizing achieve, and is there a cultural specificity of this audio experience? So these were some of the connected thoughts from the previous two conversations.
Can I also add a little bit in terms of suggestion to you, Professor? You showed a wonderful, group of people who are sort of helping you or who are sort of associated with the kind of work that you're doing, I think you should also put some musicians who can talk about sound. There are some of them who are excellent. You see, because like what Professor Sasde was talking about, sound in your mind, and that's where you begin. It's exactly similar. You see, for visual things. You see, for example, you must have an eye, to sort of perceive things, that you see, and the cone of the eye is so important. Likewise, I think your ears. I mean, look at the shape of your ears you showed in your first figure. I mean, that is a fantastic acoustic with which you are born with. So I think you should also have a kind of sort of people whom you can talk to who are experts in producing sound. And I think ultimately each musician is, I mean, his struggle in life is to understand the phenomena of sound. That's why they talk about sound coming from throat or sound coming from mouth or sound coming from your solar plexus. So I think it would be a great idea to combine these two and develop something, for teaching. And that would give a fantastic understanding to students, you see.
Yes. Yes, sir. Maybe on the way to quantifying things, somewhere down the line, I overlook the qualitative aspects, and I will look into these things and I'll put them together so that they both can marry, and I can have certain more interesting questions to this thing.
Thank you.
The other thing is, I would suggest, I mean, pardon me for suggesting, but I think in terms of listening, I think you should listen to a lady, musician called, you know, uh, 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 Kishori Amonkar talking about sound. And on the other, Leonid Bernstein's lecture to the students on music. And they only talk of sound. I mean, this could really open up, you see, the entire topic for your students, you see. And then you get into the nitty-gritties in terms of computational, methods.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I remember, seeing your image of Sagrada Familia when I was a student of architecture. I remember one of our professors telling us that there was I think a rock band. I'm not sure if it was Pink Floyd, who's actually got a whole album or definitely a song as an ode to Sagrada Familia. And I don't know if that's going to help you or not, but just something that came up with all this talk of musicians as well, because they have some other understanding of space. And so Marina has a question. She says it was an interesting presentation, and out of curiosity, how is computational design different from parametric design? And do you think algorithmic thinking is the way forward? And just very quickly, I'm just going to also read out Sachin's comment. It's, I think, a follow-up. And he said the last video simulation showed a promise where we could see sound waves reflecting from the walls that could give some idea of how the sound will work. So that was just. But yeah, Marina's question about computational design and its difference from parametric design.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a quite a debatable topic on different people perceiving it in different way. But as far as my research and reading goes for this thing, so computational design, people theoretically term it as the whole. It's the bigger umbrella of things, and when we approach parametric design, then we end up in only having certain formal or form-based results. So that's where people like Patrick Schumacher and his whole idea of parametricism comes in. But then the way forward is to look at algorithms where they do drive a process of design. Particularly in taking a small example where if an algorithm of acoustical treatment could result in a better theater. So that is where the process is driven, and that is where algorithms come into place. Parameters and parametric design generally are associated with all those crazy and Zahari forms, so to say. So that's an area which is very easy to fall into trap with. I have been to where you are really amazed what kind of forms the computer do generate, but it's also really needed to get out of it and think ahead, where you don't produce fancy forms. I hope that answers the question.
I don't know if Marina is, yeah, Marina is here. I hope it did answer her question. Aruna, did you have a...
Yeah, I just want to say, I think fabulous area of research, and I think you made anyhow this whole area of parametrics and is something that has been intriguing. And why don't we have a faculty workshop, you know, for the faculty, and we can kind of see you can do something. So this is, I'm just saying it out there. So if we can work it out in June or something, I think, because
yes, that's on our to-do list, Aruna, as one of the FTPs.
Yes,
I know
yes.
we need it, and as soon as we settle with this, with all that's going on, hopefully as soon as possible we'll do that. That's on the anvil.
So Pritam has made this possible. It seems reachable. So thank you.
My privilege, man.
Right. Are there any other questions or comments? Or suggestion? I mean, we have had a lot of suggestions for...
Just a general comment on, you know, this, I mean, it is a new trend in a way and not so new trend everywhere to kind of make the invisible visible and then study the visible in order to track the invisible. It's happened with Corona. It's happened with, and your simulation model also, you know, it's, you know, reminds me of, not in terms of the devastation, but reminds me of the virus, you know, which is kind of has its own and trajectory, and probably it's because what we know about the virus is the physics of the particle it's not even an organism. I don't know what you would call it, but it's largely, you know, to do with how much it floats, how much it sinks, and how making the invisible visible through computational design therefore will alter our perception of the invisible, and we need to kind of just be careful about whether we are limiting our realms of perception because of that. Just to...
Thank you. I think we can end on that, the visible and the invisible. If there are no other comments or questions. All right, thank you very much, Pritam. And yeah, it was, I'm sorry that I had to miss some of it. And in fact, some of us maybe more, but we're going to catch the recording, definitely. And yeah, I've just received a message from Professor Menon that he also was unable to join because of poor connectivity. So anyway, we'll make the recording available, of course, to everyone. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Pritam, and look forward to follow up propositions also. That will be great. And thank you everyone for joining in. And once again, thanks to Srijani, Sobhya, and Sachin, also Tayali, for all the support. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. And we have Tayali who's going to be presenting in 2 weeks from now. All right. Thanks everyone. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.